Good afternoon. This meeting of the Preservation Board is now in order. You can call a roll. I'll establish who's here. Instead of saying my name, just say what you thought. Michael Allen.
Hummus and chips. Homemade hummus.
Pasta salad, also homemade. Artichoke toasted ravioli from Katie's.
Michaeline.
Mr. Chairman, Clank's cookies.
Excellent. David Richardson. Baklava. Chairman Keller is here with donuts.
Staff wants to brought food, I just want to point out,
What's that?
staff is also contributed.
Is staff present? Okay. We have a quorum, ladies and gentlemen. Commissioners, has anybody read the minutes of November 20th, 2023? And if so, do you have a motion?
I move that we approve the minutes from the meeting.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of approving the minutes from the November 20th, 2023 meeting signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. The minutes are approved. Commissioners, looking down this agenda, anybody who needs to review themselves with any of these items?
Mr. Chairman, on item D, I will recuse myself.
Per usual, I will forget that other kind of reject with them, but I need to remind me. Okay. This will then be our agenda and its order. Calling first agenda item A. A bunch of buildings in the 4500 block of Manchester.
Good evening, board members, and then we stay with the Cultural Resources Office. Pardon?
What did you bring?
Homemade punch that will be assembled after the meeting is over.
Now, by punch, do you mean?
No, not the fun kind. It's a big policy. Okay, so what you have before you is a preliminary review to demolish 6 residential structures for the construction of a 5-story mixed-use building. The recommendation is that the Preservation Board grant preliminary approval with the condition that Cultural Resources Office review and approve the final details and exterior materials and color. Getting into the project,
Seems familiar.
it does. I will get to that in my report. Thank you. So the proposal is to demolish 6 residential buildings in the Forest Park Southeast neighborhood outside the boundaries of the Forest Park Southeast National Register District. The buildings are located within a preservation review district where the Cultural Resources Office Preservation Board has jurisdiction over demolitions. Next, please. 4534, pardon me, and 4538 Manchester are 1-story brick shotgun houses, both built in 1895. 4534 is in the Craftsman style with an unusual false mansard roof with flared eaves. 4538 is a restrained example of the Romanesque revival style. Its front parapet has been reconstructed. Next. 4540 Manchester, built in 1891, is Romanesque revival 2.5-story, 2-family with elegant terracotta details and a decorative slate mansard roof. 4544 Manchester, built in 1908, is a 2-story Romanesque revival 2-family with terracotta cornice. Next. 4552 Manchester, another 1-story house in the Craftsman style, was built in 1888 and has glazed brick ornament. In 4556 Manchester, also the Craftsman style, also of 1888, is a 2-story, 2-family building, again in the Craftsman style, with an intricate brick cornice. All the buildings are considered merit under the Ordinance 64689, as they would be contributing resources to a potential expansion of the Forest Park Southeast National Register District. I would note that these individual addresses are the specific locations of these buildings, but they are now, the parcels have now been consolidated into one parcel, which is known as 4534 Manchester. If we go to the next, show you the rear facades. 4540 Manchester has sustained a partial collapse of the rear facade. It has 4544 to a lesser degree. If you can just keep going through these. And 4556 has lost a part of the upper portion of its rear wall above a 1-story addition. It has also lost some face brick at the eastern parapet. In 2021, the applicant filed to demolish the buildings. That application did not include plans for subsequent construction. Cultural Resources staff denied the application, and the applicant chose not to appeal to the Preservation Board. In December of 2022, a variation of this proposal came to the Preservation Board as a preliminary review for demolition and construction of a 4-story mixed-use building with 71 residential units, 2 to 4 retail spaces, and 40 parking spaces. That proposal also included 2 vacant lots at 4527 and 4531 Swan Avenue, which would have provided gated service parking. Staff recommendation then was for preliminary approval, which the board granted with the stipulations that the Cultural Resources Office review and approve final materials and colors, and that the demolition permit be contingent on the building permit. The applicant is now proposing to add a 5th story with 37 units for a total of 108 units. Under the preliminary review policy, quote, alterations to a design approved by the Preservation Board may require the altered design to return to the Preservation Board for approval. The Cultural Resources Office shall not approve a proposal that has received approval by the board following a preliminary review and has been subsequently altered to the extent that it does not meet the applicable standards and or is significantly different from the proposal as approved by the board at the preliminary design review. Unquote. Staff has determined that the addition of a 5th floor constitutes a significant difference from the original proposal, and as such is bringing the project back to the Preservation Board. So going through the criteria, there is no redevelopment plan for the area, so that is not applicable. In terms of architectural quality, all 6 buildings are considered merit, which is defined by contributing to an existing or potential city or national historic district. In scale, architectural style, detailing, and dates of construction, the buildings are similar to other residential buildings within the National Register district and are sited adjacent to its western boundary. In terms of condition, we have not received any structural report on the building's condition. As we noted in the presentation earlier, 4540, 4544, and 4556 portions of the rear walls have failed. 4556 Manchester has also had a small loss of face brick on the eastern parapet. Masonry failures are due to lack of maintenance and do not appear to be severe enough to compromise the structural integrity of the buildings. Therefore, the buildings are all considered sound under the ordinance. In terms of neighborhood effects and reuse potential, the site is located in an area with a strong real estate market. And no information has been submitted to counter the viability of the buildings for reuse. Should the buildings be included in a potential Forest Park Southeast National Register District expansion, preservation tax credits would be available to assist in their rehabilitation. We have also not received any evidence of economic hardship. In terms of urban design and integrity of the existing block face, while there have been 2 or 3 previous losses on this block, the existing buildings continue the street wall and are consistent in scale with adjacent buildings. Loss of these 6 structures would disrupt the continuity of the block face. Buildings are sited at the major western entrance to the Grove Business District and Forest Park Southeast Neighborhood and National Register District. Subsequent new construction, there we go, complies. So the proposal is to construct a 5-story, 108-unit mixed-use building with interior and surface parking on alley adjacent parcels. It would continue the pattern recently begun in the Grove of large multi-story apartment buildings along Manchester and be similar in scale, siting, and exterior materials. The architects have worked with the Cultural Resources Office staff to refine the original submission and create a cohesive exterior design, unified color palette, pedestrian scaled first floor, and clearly defined building entry. And the next slide, I think, shows side by side what's being proposed now and what was proposed and approved last year. So you can see that there's been an addition of 1 story. Next slide. The first story of the primary facade, of the building would be a series of glazed storefronts centered at main entry marked by distinctive surrounded projected canopy. If you look at a site plan, the first floor plan, you can see that parking would be accessed from the rear alley. And this location would not be perceptible in the side of the front elevation. And while the building would be large in scale, that perception would be reduced by projecting corner bays. I'm sorry, Bob, could you go back to one of the elevations? Thank you. Flanking a 1-story section carrying a pool and roof garden. Elements have been derived from historic precedents in a contemporary translation, while the fenestration is current in form, it repeats the vertical orientation of historic windows. Modern storefronts have historic tripartite divisions, but with glazed bulkheads, and the towers permitting cornices that are overscaled and streamlined. So if we can just go through some of the elevations now. So that's the north elevation, that's what you'd see from Manchester. Then east and west, less visible. And then that's the south elevation that would face the alley and would be slightly visible from Swan. If we could just go back up to the site plan, I don't know if it's up here. Yeah, so what the board has jurisdiction over is the top portion, the part in blue and the parking lot behind it, But there have been some changes to the overall site plan. You can see that there's some parking along the alley along Swan. One parcel is accessed directly from Swan, the others are accessed from the alley, and I will get to the zoning implications in just a moment. So if we now go to context. We'll just run through. So this is the context east, looking down Manchester, further east and west, there's these warehouses and the Jiffy Lube, and across the streets, there's one building and then a lot of open space. So the 4500 block of Manchester comprises a mix of small scale residential, commercial and warehouse buildings. It is less intact than many blocks in the Forest Park Southeast neighborhood and has not been included within the boundaries of the Forest Park Southeast National Register District. There has been substantial demolition. Buildings on the north side of the block have been demolished, with the exception of 3 historic buildings at the northwest corner of Manchester and Taylor that are within the district, and remodeled one-story store at 4513. There have also been substantial losses on the south side. Aside from the 6 proposed demolitions, there remain east of the project site only 4510 Manchester and 4512 Manchester, both contributing resources to the National Register District. And 4560, a one-story brick warehouse. To the west is 4568 Manchester, warehouse remodeled into offices, and another 1930 commercial building converted to drive-in auto repair shop and the Jiffy Lube. If the demolitions are approved, there will be little of the existing block face for the proposed construction to address. However, the design would be compatible in setbacks, scale, articulation, architectural character, and exterior materials with the larger apartment buildings being constructed along the north side of Manchester. We can go back to that site plan. So to reiterate that the surface parking along Swan would be gated, and cited that gate would maintain the building line along the existing residential structures along the block face. And I'm sorry if I'm pointing at that. I think y'all can see what I'm talking about. There's the residential buildings along Swan, and the Swan accessible side has a line that meets the building line. As for the proposed use complying with current zoning requirements, although the review of the project under the form-based code has not yet been conducted by the zoning department, it appears that the proposed building would require 2 variances from the code. One is for the primary exterior material, Nichiha, which is not a permitted material. And 2, if we can go to the floor plan back, sorry. The blue areas are noted as live workspaces, and they don't meet the requirement for primary retail use on the ground floor. So again, the Swan parcels are not subject to review by the Cultural Resources Office, as they are not on parcels where demolition is proposed, but we would note that the zoning department has not evaluated the proposal to create parking lots that span lot lines involved. I'm sorry, if you could go back to the. Yeah. So those are still individual parcels, and we don't know how that works with a parking lot spanning property lines. So there is no, the commonly controlled property aspect is not applicable, accessory structure is not applicable. So preliminary findings and conclusions. 4534, 4538, 4540, 4544, 4552, and 45 Manchester, now known as 4534 Manchester, are located in the Preservation Review District. The buildings are considered to be merit, as they are a similar architectural style and date of construction to contributing resources within the district, and are adjacent to its western boundary and therefore may be considered eligible for the National Register. The buildings are sound within the definition of the ordinance, which means that visible portions of exterior walls and roofs are capable of continuing to support their current loads for 6 months or more. Demolition of the buildings would result in the loss of most of the historic fabric remaining on the block. The proposed subsequent construction would be a 5-story apartment building with interior parking that, while incompatible in scale, massing, and materials with the current building on the block, would continue the pattern of large-scale residential infill along Manchester. The architects have worked with Cultural Resources Office staff to produce a cohesive and unified design that employs various elements to both reduce the perceived scale of the building and render it more compatible with the historic fabric of the neighborhood. Based on the preliminary findings, Cultural Resources Office recommends the Preservation Board grant preliminary approval of demolition and new construction, with the stipulation that final drawings, exterior materials, and colors be reviewed and approved by the Cultural Resources Office. I would just further note, should have some letters. One is from Park Central. The other is from Forest Park Southeast, both indicated conditioned approval. We did get a follow-up email today from Forest Park Southeast that was also sent to you. Again, we sent it to you as soon as we got it. And I'll just read an excerpt. And this is from Rachel Siegert, Chair of the Forest Park Southeast Development Committee. I wanted to follow up regarding conditions in paragraph 1 of the letter regarding the developer's commitment to abate the code violations listed that have been going on ongoing for many months / years now. As of today, the developer has not made any progress on these items. Accordingly, the Forest Park Southeast Development Committee would like to confirm that it does not support granting approval for demolition at this time. I know that there's been some confusion about what that means. I believe the alderman is here and he will address that, but that concludes my report and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Here, when we looked at this a few months ago.
It was a year ago, exactly.
Was it a year ago? Okay. What was your conclusion then? Were you okay with the demolition?
We recommended approval, but you tied the issuance of a demolition permit to the issuance of a building permit.
And that approval would have expired.
No, preliminary review approvals are good for 2 years, but we're bringing it back to you because of the significant difference in the proposal from what you saw last year.
Question I had was, so last year's report, this year's report, you have the same finding conclusion that the architects worked with CRO to produce a specific unified design that employs various elements to both reduce the perceived scale of the building and render it more compatible with historic fabric of the neighborhood. But yeah, we just made it a historic polish. So how did we work with them to make it more compatible? See if we get less compatible.
It's still compatible, I guess is my response to that. It's not, it's perhaps slightly less compatible, but we still believe it's compatible.
But was last year's more compatible?
I guess it's the smaller in scale, yes.
And I have a similar question, which in the preliminary findings conclusion here, Meg, the staff is saying that this building is incompatible in scale, mass, and materials, but continues to add a large-scale residential infill in Manchester. Are you saying that because there's a preponderance of incompatible buildings, that's in the favor of approving this, or?
Well, the demolition of these buildings would mean that there's not much to be compatible with in this section of Manchester, so.
You're judging against the absence of existing.
Well, it's hard to be compatible with nothing, so, yeah, I know it's a little confusing, but yes, the historic fabric of this block would be essentially lost if these buildings were demolished. And then this would be compatible with the trend along Manchester. And I would just note that the buildings that we showed you as far as context goes, I think all of the ones in our photographs, those did not require preliminary review because those were built on vacant lots, so there was no demolition / new construction review by this body.
Right. If these buildings were in the National Register District contributing, would they be high merit under the ordinance necessarily, or
I don't believe so.
that status doesn't affect the opinion?
No, the merit and high merit are not conditioned upon their location within a National Register District.
So why this change?
Pardon?
Why the change? They can't make it work financially?
The developer is here and I'm sure he will want to speak to that.
Got 3 people signed up to speak, Kelly, Austin, and Jeff. Jeff, you're the applicant?
Yes. Would you like the developer or me to speak first?
Who are you?
I'm the architect.
Up to you.
Okay.
You guys do your presentation the way you want.
Yeah, so I was just gonna, I just need to introduce myself, Jeff McGee, architect at St. Louis Design Alliance Architects. We've been working with the Cultural Resources Division and the owner to come up with a plan that would fit the density for the overlay zoning district, and as such developed. First was a 4-story building, now a 5-story building. I'll let the developer talk about why the additional stories were added and the parking load on the surrounding sites. I just wanted to run through a little bit of the architectural characteristics of the building. Trying to maintain as much masonry in the structure as possible, which is pulled from the first level and then up into the upper levels by some of the black strips that are in there, along with the metal, which is also compatible with the overlay zoning code. Amenity deck, like you guys saw, and then there are small courtyards on each side of the building for what were going to be the live work at the first floor. There were 4 units, and then up above there were an additional 104 units that are studios, 1st bedrooms, and then 2 bedrooms in there. The primary building material is going to be Nichihon, which is a fiber cement material that is found throughout the Grove district. We also have capitals on the top of each of the towers, and some of the eyebrows will create some dimension at that front facade that presents to the street. So our goal is to create a walkable building that enforces the walkability of the neighborhood and engages with it with its amenity deck facing Manchester. As it is going to be welcoming to the Grove district on the west end. Architecturally, questions, and the developer follow up.
The layout of the live work units.
Yes.
What kind of live work scenario are you picturing? Is this what I'm wondering is this something where I could live upstairs now, my law office on the first floor, and so it would have any kind of traffic from customers, or is it exclusively sort of a residence that you could also work in?
It's a residence that you could also work in. Now, if there were to be I misspeak, override whatever I say, but our goal was to create a space where it could just be a commercial space, if need be, but it could also work as like a barber shop. If we needed to do or add a wall in there, to have more of a living space, we could do that, and then they could have their workspace out front. It's not a stacked live work, it's just a whole unit. So like a lot of these are, tenant finish would be a part of what would be involved with the live work area.
Right, thank you.
Question from Commissioner for the architect.
Did you design a parking lot on Swan Avenue?
It was a part of our design, yes, to be able to handle the parking load requested by some of the funding sources.
Is it essential if there's a curb cut and entrance from Swan Avenue, in your opinion?
In my opinion,
Yes.
I have not driven the alley yet, but everything, I've walked it summer. It is very tight, and there are some blind spots that are concerned if there's going to be traffic coming in and out of there. So creating a space where it's safe to come in and out. I don't think that the load on Swan would be significant, as the majority of the parking still would have to come from the alley. I don't see anyone parking underneath the building, then coming out of that gate, going through another gate to get into Swan, and then going out a third gate to get out. So I don't think all the parking would funnel through Swan at all. So just to create a little bit safer of an environment for those who are going to be driving, it would be a nice thing to have.
Thank you.
Developer? Questions for the developer?
Hi, Austin Bargani with Grove Properties.
Questions for the developer?
I have one, this comment from the neighborhood about materials, are you in discussions with them? Where does that stand?
On the Nichiha, are you speaking of? The Nichiha
What was
site?
the comment that they had? Something about,
Nichiha.
yeah, it was Nietzsche.
I believe that their letter said that they support the Nichiha siding. And even though it is, the form-based, I'm sorry.
You're right, it does say that.
It says that they support the Nichiha siding, but the form-based code is a little bit ambiguous as to whether the form-based code supports the Nichiha siding. I actually sat on that committee when that code was developed, and it was our intention that Nichiha be allowed. The code specifically says that hardy plank siding is not allowed. But in our committee discussions, I recall that Nichiha was okay, but because Nichiha is a type of hardy plank siding, people, I believe Cultural Resources is interpreting it to not be allowed, which we would, so however they interpret it, we would need a variance for the Nichiha. If that makes sense.
But
But
they're
it does
recommending,
say that,
they want to hold up this,
no, they're saying,
oh, so that's.
if the city of St. Louis determines that a variance is required for the Nichiha siding, Forest Park Southeast Development Committee recommends support.
I'm confused. I thought they were, did they not now withhold their support completely?
Oh my God, that's true. There's also the second letter.
The second letter, I believe, I have no idea what that's about. I just received that 10 minutes ago. I believe the elder person's going to address that.
Is the,
Can
can you answer the Swan question about the curb cut on Swan? Would that,
What's the question?
if the curb cut on Swan was eliminated and access is only available through the alley, does that somehow?
It would be really tough for cars to get in and out. First of all, there's a blind spot when that alley leads onto Taylor. I've driven it and there's buildings that back right up to the alley. The alley is very tight. And there's fence lines and buildings right at that Taylor intersection. And having cars coming in and out through Taylor, it would be tight.
So are you saying everyone's gonna enter and exit off Swan? Then,
I think it would be a combination of both, I believe, yeah, and there, you know, and there's already two other parking lots on Swan, there's a big parking lot across the street for Terra.
right,
And there's another one down the street for Washington University, where they have a lot of their staff parking. There's also, you know, only 4 or 5 other residential buildings on this block. If this block was primarily all residential buildings and you're putting a parking lot with a curb cut, then I don't think it would be appropriate, but for a street where you only have a few residential buildings left and you already have 2 parking lots on the block, I don't think it's gonna make much change to Swan Avenue itself as far as cars coming and going.
thanks.
Why is the building getting taller?
Well, for the main reason is the pro forma, it's financing. So when you guys granted approval a year ago now, unfortunately, interest rates basically doubled on me. And with the 4 stories that I had proposed, we can't make the pro forma work anymore. So we did 2 things. So we added the 5th floor, and then instead of having just straight commercial space on the 1st floor, we're now classifying it as live workspace, which gives us the option to have a live work tenant or just a commercial space. And that allows us to improve the pro forma as well, because the type of financing that we're getting does not allow, they will not take the commercial. If it's just strictly commercial, they will not allow the income from the commercial to be used in the debts and the pro forma. Unless you get the entire space pre-leased, which is very, very difficult in a new building like this, as I've experienced in the past, and I think most developers would tell you as well.
What type of finance?
It's not like finance.
Do you have those approvals?
Do not have the approvals in place. We're in that process. No, we do not have, we have preliminary approval from HUD. We do not have final approval.
They get you 2024?
That is talked about, yes.
We have a letter from the Forest Park Southeast Development Corporation here with conditions on their support for this project based on physical condition compliance with city ordinances, especially around maintenance.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about the steps you've taken to address these concerns?
We have cleaned up the site a couple of times, unfortunately, and I just got a couple of weeks ago, there was more dumping. That alley back there between Swan and Manchester is barely trafficked right now, and unfortunately, we cleaned it up, and it seems like a couple months later, more people dump things on the site. And so obviously we need to clean it up again. So I'm happy to have a formal proposal in place with them, as I stated in that letter. And then also with these buildings down, it will be a lot easier, obviously, not only to clean up the site, but I think it will keep people from dumping back there, because right now that alley back there is just so hidden. And having a view from Manchester, I think it will curb people illegally dumping back there as well.
I have another question based on what we have received from the staff. There's a letter from a resident, Armada, who says that the parcels on Swan you purchased from the LRA, and that you might risk having those clawed back by failing to abide by your agreement with the LRA. Can you speak to that?
I cannot, I would have to write this out agreement.
Oh, did you buy those from the LRA?
I bought one of them from LRA. Yes.
So Meg, did you read that letter? I'm sorry, what was it? Could we revisit that? I just want to know if there's something that needs to be resolved. But, you know, developer respond.
We have, I'll just say that in other cases, we have dealt with LRA parcels, and it's just a confusing process. I don't know what the LRA policies are. They're very case specific, they're very sales agreement specific. But it's my understanding that in general, LRA does require that buyer of their property do something with the property, whether it's a vacant lot or a building.
I'm sorry, it was that late letter that we received from the neighborhood that I was. asking.
Yes.
Does that have to do with LRA properties?
I don't think that the letter from Forest Park Southeast or from Park Central referenced LRA. I think it
No,
was.
is that their conditions? I don't know if you have that letter.
Yeah. I'm looking at both the letter from Park Central and the letter from Forest Park Southeast. I don't see anything about,
Oh, I thought you were asking me about.
there was a letter from
A letter
a
from a resident.
resident about LRA.
I think that's the only person that mentioned that, right?
This letter that we just received today.
Further questions about it? Okay, Kelly Spencer.
Hello, I'm Kelly Spencer. I am the owner of the Dogwood in the Grove. We are an event space and a wedding venue. My husband and I also own several different properties along Manchester and within the Grove. I sit on the current CID Grove board. So I'm very involved in what's going on with the community. Obviously, I want the best for our community, and I'm a preservationist at heart for sure. And I appreciate everything that y'all do to keep these historic buildings within the city of St. Louis. However, these are not in a historic district. They fall with that outside of that space. And just having a couple of hundred people coming from the west each and every weekend that are new to the Grove, new to our community, and that's the first thing that they see are these decrepit buildings, honestly, that are falling in. They're a safety hazard. They, again, they're dumping because they can. And they have graffiti all over them, and graffiti is just throughout the entire Grove, which is another issue that we're trying to work on. But as long as those buildings are still standing, that's what's going to happen. They're going to continue to fall apart. They're continue to be an eyesore. And these are beautiful renderings of what could be an incredible entrance into our community.
Two things. One, the dog is beautiful.
Well, thank you. This could also be beautiful.
Who owns those buildings?
Who owns
Those buildings.
the current building that we're discussing? I believe it's Mr. Visconti.
You think they'll take better care of the next buildings?
I don't know, do you own these current buildings now? And every time that we've had issues with overgrowth, he has been very quick to clean the sites up, but obviously it's a lot to clean up.
Thank you.
So obviously I'm very much in favor of demolition.
Those are all the people that signed to speak. Mr. Chairman, I believe the Alderman is speaking. Before you do, Alderman, I got a follow-up email from Rachel at Forest Park Southeast Development Committee, so why don't I read that first and then. Alderman, you want to sign the motion? Or one of you stuff.
So Rachel Seichert with Forest Park Southeast Development Committee. Hi Meg, I apologize for any confusion created on my end. The Forest Park Southeast Development Committee's position is that we do support the project as outlined in our letter if the conditions outlined in our letter regarding the code violations were satisfied on or before December 31st, as promised by the developer. As of today, no apparent progress has been made towards satisfying those conditions, though clearly there are still some work engaged remaining in the year. The committee's concern is that if demolition approval is granted today, the neighborhood would then lose all leverage in getting the illegal dumping, tall weeds, etc. addressed. If these items are all addressed on or before December 31st, the committee supports the project as outlined, but as of today, that has not happened. Thanks, Rachel. Thanks.
Alderman Browning.
Hello, members of the Preservation Board. First, I want to mention, I heard some concerns about compatibility with the rest of the buildings on Manchester, the historic buildings on Manchester. Several years ago, the neighborhood established a form-based district. That was done to extensive community engagement and what you could really call it our community plan. So this is in more or less full compliance with the community plan that was outlined by that form-based district. There are a couple variances here and there, as we discussed, the siding and some curb cuts. But my understanding is that the letter that was issued by the Forest Park Southeast Development Committee had two sections. It had one concerning demo and the other concerning the variances that we would need. As I understand it, we're addressing the first point today. The variances would be addressed by the Board of Adjustment when it comes time to give those. So to clarify, as the email from Rachel Siegert just clarified, the neighborhood does approve of the demo if the conditions from item number 1 are met. And as we know, today is the 18th. We still have several days before the 31st. So our hope is that those conditions can be met. But I need to emphasize really strongly here that demo is necessary. Part of the difficulty of maintaining those properties is those buildings. The alley is in extremely bad shape. I walk it routinely just to make sure that all is well back there. And the dumping is bad, but you can't even fit a truck down it. I mean, if you tried to drive your sedan down it, you'd have to turn around. It's so overgrown and so tight in some spots. So demo would allow us easier access to the site and allow the property to be maintained better. And I have received commitment from the developer that they will be maintaining that site as it will be the future site of this beautiful building. I also want to make clear that we're in favor of the additional story. I think the building looks better now, actually, and would love to see that added density, those added units. The nature of Manchester has more or less changed over the years, and the form-based district for Forest Park Southeast anticipates that change and gives guidance for how the neighborhood wants to add that density, walkability, and all that housing. So we need demo. I think these are beautiful buildings, but unfortunately the time for them has passed. And we would really like to see in the new year those come down, as they are a major representation of our neighborhood right now. They are detrimental, an active detriment really, to the neighborhood and its ability to attract visitors. And so cleaning up this blight not only would allow us to maintain the property better, but would also really allow people to see that forward progress that's happening here. So I think overall, what you can tell from the letter is that the community is excited about this development. We are looking forward to seeing it happen. We do have a couple quibbles here and there about parking on Swan and curb cuts and things like that. But again, those are variances that this board, is my understanding, wouldn't be considering today. So the demo is really what's necessary. And with that, I'll take any questions you have.
You know who owns those buildings?
Yeah, it's Austin Rosandy. Yeah.
How long have they owned them?
I don't know how long he's owned them, but I do know that when he purchased them, they were already in pretty bad shape. He has explored getting them rehabbed and back into shape. But and I also have to say, as far as developers go, Austin does not demo often. This is a man who usually does explore bringing buildings back to life and has done so for many, I think dozens of buildings in Forest Park Southeast. So while I understand this is one of those situations that kind of looks like demo by neglect, it is one of those situations where we do see that the very nature of Manchester, as I mentioned, has changed, and residential housing on this end of the block just doesn't really make sense anymore. Not that kind of residential housing where someone would be interested in buying a house across from an abandoned market and really that close to Kings Highway and all the traffic and all of that. Now, apartments do make sense here, and if you looked at the property across from it, the Manchester Market, that has been abandoned for several years now. There are plans in the future to turn that into more housing as well. So just like the buildings down the block that were built by Front Door, that are multi-stories, and just like the rest of the buildings that are going up on Manchester, this new building does fit into that aesthetic for the neighborhood and does fit with the vision that we came up with when we did the form-based district.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, commissioners, concludes the testimony that we have signed up to speak. Commissioner Allen, you got a motion?
Yes.
Wait for it.
Oh, well, not sure it's going to be everyone's favorite, but so I would move the preservation board deny preliminary approval for the demolition of the 6 buildings and the construction of a 5-story mixed use building. Well, personally, you know, I do think the long ownership and lack of care for protected resources is a problem, and I think the greatest demolition for neglect came up. I know Austin is a pretty conscientious developer, but there's been really no action with these buildings, and you know, I feel like we should strongly discourage long holding of historic buildings only to have them come to demolition. I also think that the development committee's conditions should be met before we sign off on this project. So.
I think we should approve it, sorry, Michael. But I think it was the alderman that made a good point, as a realtor. I think those single family homes, like even if you restored it, no one, I mean, I'm sure someone would buy it, but by the time you put all that money in, it would be hard to resell it, and it just wouldn't make sense. And I think this sort of project would make perfect sense, and it would help add to the neighborhood, so.
I work with the Forest Park Southeast Form-Based Code all the time, and it's difficult, but it also provides pretty clear direction about what the neighborhood wanted in certain streets and certain places in the neighborhood, and this is what they defined for this location in terms of the scale, so I think we should follow their lead. It was a lot of work to get that thing passed.
So.
I think they say that it does comply, right? That's my understanding. It sounds like there is some question about the siding and if it does or does not require a variance. And if it does, maybe it's in writing and not in sort of principle of it. I'm not sure. The live work unit, I do think is really interesting. That's a really big part of the Forest Park Southeast Form-Based Code, that they were trying to encourage live workspaces. It's like one of the only places in our city that we even allow them.
I was intrigued that you were going to house.
I have just had to read this code a lot, and so I'm very familiar with it, and I do think the form-based code supports the live work.
I could live in it and practice law.
Well, I just mean, the idea was to activate the street.
Plan.
Certainly, it would be nice if these ended up being live workspaces that had some street activation and they weren't just live workspaces. But simply having the door to the living space open up to the street is a certain level of activation you wouldn't have otherwise, so.
That is the coolest part of Virginia.
I think that it gets at the spirit of what they were going for, and so that variance doesn't bother me that much.
Yeah, and it's the neighborhood ones that, I mean. Who are we to
They do
stop them?
support the live work aspect of it.
We get it.
So now I have a motion, I'm just kidding.
It looks like I made the motion a year ago,
Yes, you
but
did.
now, looking at it, I mean, and considering that we were given direction from a circuit court decision about applying these criteria, I don't know how we approve this based on the report we have here. Well, I do know how the path forward of this project would be if the Board of Aldermen would do a redevelopment plan that provided for its demolition, which is criteria A, but which is not applicable here. But if you go through the criteria, A is not applicable, B, these are various structures, they shouldn't be torn down. C, they're sound structures, they shouldn't be torn down. D is neighborhood effect, three, no evidence, is what this says. of a hardship, there was no information that you could think about. It is a strong real estate market. Urban design, they testified velocity 6 says velocity is big disrupting constitution block base. And then add the proposed subsequent construction and testified that we are less compatible. So yeah, this year I'm finished with that. Right.
Now, can I just clarify one thing? You did testify, Meg, that it was less compatible than the previous proposal,
But it's still required.
correct?
Yes, because it's not as small in scale compared to the surrounding buildings, but I do want to clarify one thing. At this point, I'm not testifying. That's my understanding. I'm speaking. Testimony comes in with appeals of denials, correct? Yeah. Madam Attorney? Okay. But yes,
And so you're speaking to the compatibility of surrounding historic structure?
right. The surrounding area and this block minus these buildings, which if this building is built would no longer exist, is smaller scale. So the addition of another story makes it slightly less compatible than it would have been in the previous version.
Is there any science to what surrounding area means?
There is not.
So, Meg, before you leave, I have always called everything said to us testimony.
Okay.
Are you just pointing out that you're not under oath?
I just wanted to be clear on the record. That's all.
Is your testimony the truth?
My testimony is the truth. Yes.
You feel better?
I do. Thank you.
Has there been any pushback on this from the neighborhood? We've got some letters.
Yes.
But the majority is okay with this.
Oh, majority's not on the record. We only have the two.
Any further comments?
Yeah, I think great points for Dave here.
You're gonna take monkey wrench?
No. No, in fact, I'll leave it at that.
I mean, I just don't understand, like, these buildings are just gonna sit here for another 100. Oh, I thought you were done. Sorry, your long pauses are confusing. I'm sorry. Pauses are like 10 minutes. I don't know. Sorry, Anthony.
Everest, Colombo.
I don't know what that is. And I do that.
No, go ahead.
Okay, you done, sorry. We're with him for a long time, so I know. Long pauses. I mean, I just don't see anyone taking these buildings and redeveloping and trying to sell these things. I deal with a lot of investors and I just don't see it. I feel like they're gonna be naked for another 50 years, or we could have a beautiful building that's actually functioning and adding to the community and the community wants it, so. That's my. But again.
Mr. Robinson. Do you want to add anything to the comments with them allowed to give us?
Would you buy this and redevelop it?
No.
Exactly, he's an investor.
Yeah, I look at Manchester and I look at where Manchester is headed, and the answer is no, single family residential in this area. No.
Well, I don't think,
And-
I'm sorry.
Sorry, and based on the condition of several.
I don't know what it works.
You like the new building? That's for both of them.
Hmm.
You like the proposal? Is that what you think?
Oh, now that part. You want me to respond to that?
Well, I'm just curious, where you're standing on. And you can. Hey, well,
I am never very keen on a lot of new development architecture that I see in the city, so the answer to that is I wouldn't design something like that.
Well, I just wanted to clarify, with Commissioner Allen, so your motion wasn't necessarily, aimed at potentially saving those buildings, but it was more to make sure that the conditions of the neighborhood were met.
Right. Feel a lot more comfortable if we met those.
Yeah, so I think
Before
that's.
taking the vote, yeah.
Could we hypothetically, could one make a motion granting preliminary approval, tying it to a building permit and tying it to the conditions of the neighborhood?
You could.
And the financing, because they don't have that security.
You could if you wanted.
Okay, just wanted to know if that was allowed.
I didn't mention the answer. We could if we wanted.
Okay.
Defer. So.
Well, certainly they wouldn't tear it down if we tie it to a building permit either, but I'm wondering if a person can make a motion granting preliminary approval, if tied to a building permit.
One to make a motion. I'm not sure if there are folks.
We could just call the roll on my motion and see where that goes.
Sure.
Do what?
Just call the roll on motion and see where it goes.
Wait, but if, okay, but if we defer it, can I ask the people in the audience the question? The applicant, yeah, and the architects, was deferring it, cause I'm just really cognizant of timelines and money. But does that affect anything out, like financing, trying to move that forward, does that affect anything by us deferring?
It affects what the community wants. The community, I think you've heard from the alderman and myself and the neighborhood that they want these buildings down sooner than later. From a financing standpoint, the HUD loan takes up to a year to finalize. We're 3 months into that process, so the financing part piece is not, and the neighborhood's aware of this, the other person is aware of this. The financing is not going to be closed until summer of next year. And so, and in your packet, we have proposed to start construction in August. And what I heard today is that the neighborhood wants the buildings down now and doesn't want to wait until then.
So you're saying deferring doesn't make a difference if you defer it, is that what?
Not on the financing side, but it makes a difference to the neighborhood.
Okay,
Are you prepared to get the building permit at the same time?
Yes, I would have to, yes. That would be after financing is approved, so that wouldn't be until the summer of next year. So we are hoping to get these buildings down before then.
Our last approval last year of this board was condition of building. permit.
Right,
Yes.
so if we did that hypothetically, you would be able to tear them down until summer, you said, because that's when the financing is on. Got it.
So this summer, this coming.
The financing will not be finalized until then, yes.
So it sounds like deferring it means nothing.
right. That's all I got.
Right.
But deferring it would allow him the time to remedy the conditions the neighborhood is.
We're happy to meet
decided.
those conditions. I've already spoken to the older person about that, all those conditions. We're happy to meet. On this. It's just a matter of-
A month from now, we'll be faced with this situation of
Yeah.
him asking for demolition without a permit. Which is something we try to avoid.
Right,
Right, but we
Yeah.
could also,
condition it on the construction right now.
right, that's what I'm thinking.
Right.
Because why not, what's gonna be different in a month?
He's trying to.
And the reality is some of the conditions, especially the dumping, I mean, you can clean that up tomorrow. And a week from tomorrow, there's more trash. I think that's just not, I just don't think that we need to consider that.
Having these down is going to make it a lot easier to clean up. And like I said, having the site open, it's going to deter dumping, future dumpings.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Let's see where we are on the motion to the poll. Fails. Let's get that to motion.
Right.
The motion on the floor, of course, now is to the poll. Approval, I'm gonna call the roll. Commissioner Allen, you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Hammond, you vote yes or no?
No,
Commissioner Hamilton?
No.
Yes. Sure. That's not it.
There's no confusion, no.
Yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Richardson, you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Ross, you vote yes and no.
No.
There are 3 no's, 3 yeses. Everyone's yes. Okay. Okay, agenda item B. And by the way, every commissioner looked at me and smiled.
That's how you go.
The chair could vote present on this. You're right.
Chair, I don't think I did that so often that when there's a time for the last.
Thank you, made that on record. We used to.
Good evening again. Nick Lusko here presenting the proposed project at 4333 Connecticut, which is to demolish the single-family house and garage to construct a 5-unit apartment building. This is in the Oak Hill National Register District. It's also in a Preservation Review District, and it's located in Tower Grove South. The recommendation is that the Preservation Board grant preliminary approval for the demolition of the single-family dwelling and construction of a 5-unit apartment building with the condition that the Cultural Resources Office review and approve final design details and exterior materials and colors. Let's see, going through the criteria. Actually, let me just walk through the block a little bit. So this is the house from the side. This is from the alley. You can see the side of the building from the rear, and then that's the garage that would be demolished. This is the house in context that is looking east towards Morganford. In fact, I think you can see the MoFo building in the distance at the corner. Thank you, Bob. This is context on the other side of the street. So you can see the mix of housing types and styles and eras in this block. This is the context on the street. There are some other wooden shotguns along the street, but you can see there are some brick multifamily homes and also new construction on that block. Okay, let's go back to the original picture. So there is no redevelopment plan in the areas. That's not applicable. The existing house is a contributing building as it could contribute to a possible local historic district, but it is listed in the Oak Hill National Register District nomination as a non-contributing structure. The house is nearly identical in scale, size, and details to several other 1.5-story houses on the block, likely all constructed around the same time. As far as condition, the building appears sound under the definition in ordinance 64689. As far as neighborhood effect and reuse potential, the site is located in an area with a strong real estate market. Reuse potential, we have not received any information to counter the viability of the building for reuse, nor have we received any evidence of economic hardship. The integrity of the existing block face, as we showed earlier in the context slides, this block contains a mix of housing styles and types, including wood frame 1.5-story houses, 1-story brick houses, 2-story brick houses, 2-story multifamily brick apartment buildings. The loss of this 1.5-story wood frame building and its replacement by a 2-story brick apartment building would not adversely impact the continuity and rhythm of the block. Post subsequent construction. Now we can go to that other slide. Thank you. Post construction. Oh, sorry. We believe that the proposed construction would equal or exceed the contribution of the existing structure to the integrity. We believe that it is compatible with the neighborhood context, and the existing structure has been greatly altered from its original historic appearance. As far as architectural compatibility complies, the proposed construction would be a 2-story, 3-bay, 5-family building with a red brick front facade. The original submission to the Cultural Resources Office was a strongly contemporary design that would not have been contextual with the historic resources of the Oak Hill Historic District. Considering suggestions made by CRO staff, the architect has altered his first design, incorporating components of an adjacent 4-family building at 4339 Connecticut. Bob, you can go to the next slide. That's the building to the left, and then the next slide should show that side by side. Constructed in 1924, 4339 is a craftsman influenced design with a center entry bay containing a single leaf door with side lights and a stair window above. The center bay is flanked at each story by paired double hung windows, and the facade culminates in a false mansard with projecting eaves. The new proposal is similar in scale, materials, entry design, and fenestration pattern to 4339 Connecticut, and presents a front facade with center entry, and side lights beneath the projecting awning, The bay above is recessed and contains a large fixed windows. Flanking bays have windows that are contemporary in detail, but compatible in placement and proportion to those of the neighboring building. And the front parapet now ends in a simple projecting cornice. The construction would commence within 12 months, and as we mentioned, there's a non-contributing garage on the property that would also be demolished, so. Preliminary findings and conclusions, 4334 Connecticut is located in the Oak Hill National Register District and the Preservation Review District. The existing building is considered contributing in that it could contribute to a possible local historic district. The building is sound within the definition of the ordinance, which means visible portions of exterior walls and roofs appear capable of continuing to support their current loads for 6 months or more. Proposed subsequent development would be a 2-story, 5-unit brick apartment building that the Cultural Resources Office determined would be compatible with the existing resources of the Oak Hill National Register District, and therefore would have no adverse effect upon the district's historic character. Lastly, I'd like to note that we've received a letter, and you should receive it as well, that the Tower Grove South Neighborhood Association supports the project. So based on these findings, our office recommends that the Preservation Board grant preliminary approval of the demolition and new construction with the stipulation that final drawings, exterior materials, and colors be reviewed and approved by the Cultural Resources Office.
Hey, what was the model example again?
It's not a model example, it's simply an inspiration. There's a requirement for model example because this is in a local historic district, but the building to the left, if you look at this drawing on the right,
That's the one.
yeah,
So. Pretty big departure from that. But he doesn't need to follow that to the T.
no, but again, this is not a local district. There's no requirement that anyone use a model example. We worked with the architect to bring an earlier, very contemporary design more into contextual compatibility with other brick fourplexes on the block.
So just clarifying, so it's not high merit, it's not merit, it's not qualifying, it's contributing.
Yes, we actually had internal discussion about this because the definitions in the ordinance are. They leave room for interpretation. The other description, I think, is non-contributing, and we didn't think it was non-contributing, so we decided it was contributing. But again, there isn't it's not scientific, these determinations, so.
So we don't need to find anything special, unusual circumstances to allow the demolition of this one, because it's not any of those high merit or qualifying.
Correct.
Are you agree?
It's not non-contributing.
We agree.
Contributing.
Got it, thank you.
We wish there were a fifth definition, but.
Yes, I move that the Preservation Board grant preliminary approval for the demolition of a single family house and the construction of a 5-unit apartment building with the condition that Cultural Resources Office review and approve final design details and exterior materials and colors.
Your motion made in reference to the primary outline in ordinance.
It is.
Second.
Discussion?
I guess, yeah, I just wanted to know that it's different than what we just had before, because the city just contributing, not a high merit or qualified.
I agree.
The motion on the floor has been made and seconded. I'm gonna call a roll.
Can I also add to the motion, the reason it's different than the one before is because it they worked with Cultural to ensure that it is similar in scale, materials, entry design, and fenestration pattern to the existing block.
Well, I was gonna suggest that you put our little caveat on there that they have to get a building.
Building permit?
Yeah.
That's fine with me.
Second. Again. The revision.
Okay, motion. As revised, before us, made and seconded, calling a roll. Commissioner Allen, you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Hamilton, you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Hamilton, you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Green, you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Richardson, you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Robinson, you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Chair abstains on this vote. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 judges, but one is with. The motion carries.
Dan Cameron from the Coastal Resource Fund. This is a referral from the Board of Public Service under ordinance 64689. Preservation Board is required to recommend approval on any encroachments into public right of way. And that is essentially what this is. Next, please. This is the Reliance building. And you may remember that you approved a substantial rehabilitation in addition to this building in March of 2022. And this is the site, and essentially they are upgrading the surrounding sidewalk. And honestly, the only thing that they are really doing, changing in it, is they're constructing a bike ramp and a new accessibility ramp. Everything else will, it remains substantially the same. Next. You can see that current conditions are not ideal on any of the existing sidewalks. Next. And this is the project that was approved. So these encroachment will contribute to the total project. And the staff is recommending that the board recommend to the Board of Public Service approval of the project. Questions?
I move that we recommend to the Board of Public Service the approval of the permit for the intended work pursuant to ordinance 64689, section 51 as codified at 24:24:10 of the revised code of the city of St. Louis.
Second.
Commissioner Allen, you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Hammer, you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Hamilton, you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner McLean, you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Richardson, you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Robinson, you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Chair abstains on this vote. There are 6 yeses, 1 abstention. The motion carries. Commissioner Cummings, 2-minute break.
Okay.
For the pizza to go practically.
You're still ordering.
Oh.
Hilarious.
It's okay.
Blame it on Matt. She's not in here.
Order.
Yeah.
Hey, lads, you can-
Mute the whole thing.
Oh,
You can't, I mean, it's over there, don't
oh,
I?
I
I can't, I have to go over there and do the whole room.
Usually you don't bring it down.
No, don't worry about it.
Right. Somebody here for agenda item.
Or on the Zoom.
Yeah.
Yes.
You probably get them all, just.
That's
Hmm?
Sorry.
We have waiting on Zoom at the folks that shuttles on.
Okay. Yes, I move that we change the agenda order.
Mr. Chairman, I need to recuse myself on this. Agenda item 8. Shows my name.
Do I hear a motion regarding the agenda item? Yeah.
Make one, but
Oh.
Andrea, if you have an interesting.
I'll be, yeah.
Presentation for us.
The applicant has a presentation. Here.
My motion is that the preservation board direct the staff to prepare a report for the state historic preservation office that the property meets the requirements of the National Register criteria A for industry.
Second.
We're gonna call a roll. Alan, you vote after matter.
Recused.
I'm sorry.
You said.
Oh, it's actually inside. I need that. Hannah, yes or no?
Yes.
Hannah, yes or no?
Yes.
Everything yes or no?
Yes.
Brittany Robinson, yes or no?
Yes.
Yes.
That is Chair abstains. That is 5 yeses, 1 abstention, 1 recusal, and the motion carries. Following now, agenda item D. And.
Mr. Chairman, I'm recused on this one.
Be serious about it.
Thank you, Ms. Walsh. Alan,
Sorry, what?
you know, agenda item E.
Okay.
They don't need to be on the Zoom.
Oh, I'll let them know.
Alright. This is 10 Maryland Plaza, and it's appeal the director's denial to alter a storefront. I'm Andrea Gagan with the Cultural Resources Office. I swear to tell the truth. Need to enter into the record the application, the agenda, the PowerPoint, the Italy ordinance 64689 is amended by 64925. Was in certified local historic district ordinance 56768 as amended by 69423. And the project is in the Southwest and certified local historic districts, where Cultural Research Office Preparation Board has the jurisdiction over exterior alterations. The resource office received a permit application to alter the storefronts at 10 Maryland Plaza. Project calls for renovation of 2 existing storefronts on the north and east facades of this classical revival building constructed in 1916. To entirely replace the historic tripartite vision of the storefront, removing the original multi-light transoms and existing paneled bulkheads and replacing them with expansive shop windows and signboards that would carry large interior lit signs. Tile would cover the transom areas as well as the corner post. As the Central West End Historic District standards clearly prohibit the proposed design, the Cultural Resource Office Director denied the permit application, and the applicant has appealed that denial, which is now in brought before the preparation board.
Sorry, that's right.
Okay, it's these.
Sorry, that's all right.
Is those 2 storefronts, the size of 2 building, the location. And the 2 storefronts in question. It's not comply, storefront would remove the original transoms, shop windows, and existing bulkheads. The bulkheads, while not original, are a panel design that are appropriate to the historic building. Proposed large shop windows would be nearly to grade and the transit area covered with light colored tile to serve as signboards. The original corner post would remain but also be covered with tile. The proposed design, which would destroy the traditional tripart divisions of the historic storefronts and would not comport with the classical detailing of the building itself. It would have a significant adverse effect on the historic and architectural character of the building. It also does not comply because it does not respect the scale, proportions, pattern, color, and details of material of the current historic storefronts. And the tile and large metal storefronts also do not comply with the historic district standards. Cinderella Plaza is located in the Boston local historic district. Post storefront design would entirely remove the historic storefront and replace it with a modern storefront design. The proposed design does not comply with the West End historic district standards as incompatible in style, materials with classical and environmental nature of the building. The Cultural Resource Office has not received comment from the Ward Alderman, but the West End Association has sent a letter in opposition to proposed storefronts. And I believe Jim Dwyer will talk about that. Based on the preliminary findings, the Cultural Resource Office recommends preservation for the whole director's denial of proposed storefront if they do not comply with the West End local historic standards. Context. Questions?
The appellant present?
Yes.
He's online. Mr. De Niro.
Yes,
There you go.
Ethan Arrow here from Laser Away.
Can you see him?
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Anthony Zanero. I'm a project manager here at Laser Away. I work on our nationwide expansion program. For those of you who don't know,
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes. Is your testimony going to be the truth?
I'm sorry, what?
Are you going to tell the truth?
I promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Okay, that's good till midnight. Thank you. What would you like us to do?
You can, if you fast forward or skip ahead to just one of the storefront renderings. Maybe the next one, the diagonal one. Yeah, this one's good. For those of you who don't know, Laser Away is a national retailer who provides high quality aesthetic dermatology services like laser skin treatments and Botox. We have 140 locations throughout the country in over 20 states. The store proposed at 10 Maryland Plaza will be the first of Laser Away's clinic in St. Louis and in Missouri. We really look forward to joining the community in St. Louis. We believe that Laser Away's business presence is strongest in walkable, well-designed neighborhoods and districts like the Central West End, and we typically make large investments in our spaces and our facades and pride ourselves in providing positive contributions to the business communities that we join, both aesthetically and as a productive business in the community. We recognize that the design proposed is not a recreation of the existing storefront, and we proceeded in pursuing a more contemporary approach. We proposed this because we felt that it would be beneficial to the district and to our brand to provide an updated storefront. After completing our initial research and developing our first proposal, we discovered that the existing facade is in disrepair. The wood trim, concrete curb, and paint is not a candidate to be restored and will need to be replaced. We interpreted the preservation code and the improvements being made by other neighboring tenants in developing our first design. We pursued a design to conform with the look and feel of these other national brands in the neighborhood. National brand retailers in the neighboring stores like Suit Supply, Lululemon, and Kendra Scott have provided a similar street presence to what we proposed, while still connecting back to the look and feel of the historic buildings that they occupy. We attempted to provide this refreshed look that aligns with these other precedents in the area, which you can see in our large light glass, shiny large format tile, and monotonal materials that provide these cues of modernity. We do understand that this design eschewed elements that were key to meeting the district's historical preservation standards. We wanted to thoughtfully provide a connection to Central West End's district's history and connect it to LA's modern brand mission. So we do respect the decision of this board. We're grateful for the guidance provided by Jim Dwyer of the Central West End Association. I want to thank Andrea Gagan for her guidance on this process as well. We just wanted to say that we are excited to join this community, and we look forward to working with Preservation Board, Central West End Association, and the Cultural Resources Office as we continue to design our store and eventually open our first Laserway in the St. Louis metro area. And bring our services to the community. We will be working to revise this design to align better with the historic standards put forth. And I just wanted to thank you for your time. Thank you for everybody's consideration on this proposal. And again, we look forward to joining the community with a design that will be satisfactory to the Cultural Resources Office. So thank you.
So just to clarify, is your testimony that you're withdrawing this design?
Yes, we will. We'll be submitting a new design that meets the historic character that you guys seek.
Like, how do you want to proceed?
Process wise, what happens now? I think just it might be the safest thing for the Preservation Board to uphold the denial, and then that doesn't prevent us from working with the applicants on the revised proposal, correct?
Or could we have approved the mysterious revised proposal, assuming that you work with them?
If it meets the Central Western standards, it doesn't have to come to you at all.
Sure.
We just deny this and then that they've agreed to work with you guys. So
I think, or correct me if I'm wrong, I think that's the safest, cleanest thing procedurally.
I mean, if it is denied, the appellant certainly has the right to appeal it, but it sounds from his testimony that he's going to come to you with a new design. And for all practical matter, but that will close this item. Or, you know, whatever motion you decide to make, we'll close this item, the board that is.
Is there anybody else online besides Mr. Dwyer?
No.
Put Mr. Dwyer on, please.
Mr. Dwyer, are you there?
Yes, I am here. But I think, given Anthony's testimony, there is no need, unless I'm guided otherwise by the chairman, I do not believe there is any need for me to recite for the record that which I have submitted in writing. I am glad to hear, Anthony and I have spoken a few times over the course of this issue, and I'm glad to hear that they are willing to reconsider and essentially are withdrawing the appeal today.
Thank you. Give me 1 minute to consult with the attorney. Okay, business. Yeah. I believe that this appeal has been withdrawn by the town, which means there is time before us.
Okay, yeah, see you later then.
Okay. Thank you all very much. Your patience.
Motion to adjourn.
second,
Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
we have one.
Got it.
Yeah.
Without the objection, we stand adjourned. Thank you all very much.
Try to stop the recording.
You were- I was-
You're like 10.
Oh, it's-